I have already introduced myself, but I'm going to do it again because it's on my notes. So, my name is Jeff Geist. I'm the manager of community and professional education at Duke Farms, and I'm really excited to get our next panel discussion started. So, today we're going to talk about climate interpretation and engagement. We heard about how important it is to decarbonize our operations, and Raphael kind of touched on how we need to recognize how equally important it is to let people know what we're doing in this kind of area because at least in my experience, and I'm going to call out Duke Farms a little bit here, and I'm sorry, John and Margaret, but we do a really great job of like optimizing our operations and electrifying our operations, but we don't do as great of a job of talking about it to our audiences. And Lauren Guestella is our communications manager, and since she's been here, we've been getting a lot better at it and doing those types of things. But it's really, really important to have some interpretation, be able to talk about it, and bring our visitors, bring our learners in. So I'm really excited to talk about climate interpretation and engagement with our four incredible panelists. So we're going to hear from the Climate Museum, the Natural History Museum of Utah, the Wild Center, and Bernheim Forest and Arboretum on engaging with the public on climate change and inspiring action. So that's going to be the topic of our next kind of group of people. We're gonna go right into lunch, so we'll probably go right until about noon, and we're not gonna delay lunch, don't worry. So if we don't have enough time for audience questions, we'll have time to kind of chat during lunch. So I'm gonna queue up our first panelists. So everyone please welcome Anais Reyes from the Climate Museum, and give her a round of applause while I get her slides up.
Hi everyone. I guess I want to start by saying thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for having me, and allowing me to join my fellow panelists to talk about this today. My name is Anais Reyes. I'm the curator at the Climate Museum. So we're based in New York City. We're the first museum focused on climate change and climate action in the US. Now there are multiple, thankfully. So we are very interdisciplinary. We use the arts and cultural programming to create pathways into climate engagement. And I always like to start off presentations with this story because it was such a pivotal moment for us at the museum. This was one of our first projects. This was the first project I personally was a part of. It was called Climate Signals. It was a public art project with the artist Justin Bryce Scorglia. And it was in 2018. And basically this artist has this practice of taking road signs that, in a regular context would warn of dangerous conditions ahead. And instead of putting road warnings, he puts climate warnings on them and puts them in public places for people to see. And so we had a 10-site public art installation all around New York City across all 5 boroughs as one of our major projects for that year. And as part of this project, the signs were in 5 different languages. They were in all different types of artistic, creative, social justice communities. We really tried to reach a diverse audience. We had many collaborative partners. We had many events. And one event that really stood out to us was called Ask a Scientist Day. So we basically partnered with different professors, researchers, scientists, policy experts from the different universities around New York City, from the mayor's office. And we stationed a few of them at every single of the 10 signs all around New York City. And in preparation for this day, some of these experts from NASA, from Columbia, they were nervous about how to answer climate questions. Like, oh, what if a denier comes up and tries to start something? So we had a lot of meetings kind of preparing for the day. And so the day comes, and across all of these 10 locations, the question that we got over and over and over again, it wasn't necessarily about climate science. It wasn't any denialist. Didn't get a single denialist. It was just, what can I do? Over and over and over again. And that was so powerful for us because we hadn't really prepared an answer to that question. And now every program that we do, we feel the responsibility to answer the question that people are coming to us with, what can I do? And this is another thing that really sticks out to us that I like to share. I imagine the people in this room might know this statistic, but what percentage of adults in the US are concerned about climate change? 65. Yes. So 65% are worried about climate change. This sounds like a lot of you know this is a longitudinal study from Yale University and George Mason University. But one thing we also like to talk about is that as of 2024, or spring 2025, 65% rarely or never discuss it. And so there's this climate silence, that we need to break. And like I said, maybe a lot of us know about this, but the public doesn't really know about this. And so there's this silence that they feel that no one talks about climate change, so I can't talk about climate change. I don't know what to do. It creates that reinforcing negative spiral. And so, one thing, I'll add one thing about this. This is really key to how we understand our own audience. Basically, the work of the Climate Museum is to address that majority of people who are worried about climate change and don't know what to do, don't know how to act, don't know where they fit into this conversation. And I guess one misconception that sometimes people walk in with is that sometimes visitors ask us like, oh, like how does your work change the minds of denialists? And we're like, oh, we don't really care about denialists because, I'm sure as many of you know, it's an increasingly small amount of the public population, and so the work of the Climate Museum is really focused on moving the people who are worried but silent to, worried but active, worried but connected, worried but doing something about it, feeling like they have agency and some amount of power in this situation. And so we do that through these exhibitions and public programs. So over the past 10-ish years, we've done 17 exhibitions, over 350 events, and had over 166,000 visitors. And like I said, our goal with every program after that Ask a Scientist Day and after another event, we really face this moment of like, we need to be answering this question, what can I do? And how we do that, we've found this formula that really works for us. That's the shorthand that we call it is art, learning, and action. Every program that we do, like I said, we're very interdisciplinary, incorporates art, learning to guide people into action. So I told you about one of our programs. I'm going to tell you about two more really quickly. So in 2022, 2023, we had our first pop-up exhibition in Soho. Like I said, for the past 10 years, we've worked kind of in a collaborative format with other galleries, other museums, other institutions to kind of like, we don't have a permanent location. We're in the process of designing our permanent location, which I'll get to at the end. But this was one of our first, like, especially independent projects. And so the art in this formula, it was this piece by the artist David Opdyke. He, as you can see on the left, he makes what he calls postcard murals, and this one was called Someday All This. So he'll use these vintage postcards, he'll like paint little interventions into them, he'll create these landscapes, and this one told a story of climate displacement and ecological disruption. And it's very detailed, very layered. It was a beautiful piece because you could get up close and see all the details and also take a few steps back, and it was still, there were so many moments where you felt invited into the piece to really find something that you could connect with, and it really resonated with our audience. There were little sea monsters and little creatures he was also very good at, even though this was kind of a post-apocalyptic scene. This artist is really good at inserting humor into the piece, so it made it really easy to kind of face the harsh truths, but also realize it doesn't all have to be all doom and gloom. And David was a really great artist to work with for that reason. He was basically like, no one wants to hear that person standing on the soapbox and pointing at you saying that you're wrong. I just have really strong feelings about, he made a lot of political artwork, so he was really excited to work with the museum to connect people to action, which he felt like it was missing in a lot of other contexts. And so the learning aspect of this exhibition, we had a section of the text. But as we were curating this show, we came across this study that was just perfect. It was published in 22. It said that Americans underestimate popular climate policy support by nearly half. Basically, the research found that 80 to 90% of Americans underestimate the prevalence of support for major climate policies and climate concern. So the data said 66 to 80% of Americans support policies, Americans estimate that the prevalence is closer to 37 to 43% on average. And the myth was so exaggerated that the researchers didn't call it like a misunderstanding or a misconception. They literally termed it a false social reality. That's how consistent this pattern was all over the U.S. As you can see here in New York State, 72% of residents were concerned, but everyone thought it was closer to 44%. Even in more conservative states, in Mississippi, 61% were climate concerned, but residents thought it was only 33%. And so when we had this information in the exhibition, teaching people about it, having our docents have conversations about it, people were like genuinely mind blown. They were like, I had no idea. I felt so alone. Basically the story that we get a lot is people will say that I thought we weren't acting on climate change because no one really cared. And it's really, just having that conversation to teach people we're really more on the same page than we think is really critical to helping people feel like they're not shut down, they're not alone, there's something they can do. Oh, actually, let me go back. And so that's a study that we still reference a lot and we search for updates on. The action section of this exhibition was what we call, in every one of our exhibitions, we call it the Action Center. And the first time we did it was an exhibition after that Ask a Scientist Day, so this was maybe the third or fourth iteration. But every exhibition that we do now has an action center, and we basically offer very specific actions that visitors can take to get involved with climate change. And they're always very focused on civic and collective actions. We feel like people are often given the same story that, like, in order to fix climate change, you can, like, turn off the lights or, like, not use plastic straws. But we really like to teach people that climate change is a systemic issue, and we really need more information and more education about systemic solutions. And so we promote actions like voting, sending postcards. In this case, it was postcards because it worked perfectly with the artist's work. Sending postcards to representatives, talking about climate change, busting that myth that people don't care, that talking about the false social reality. Joining marches and rallies, getting involved with local organizations and grassroots organizing. We try to teach people the potential of, like, multiplicative actions over additive actions over individual or consumer actions. And the way that this action center works is basically people will commit to actions, and based off of the action that they commit to, they'll take a sticker and put it on a sticker wall, which I will talk about in the next project. So our most recent exhibition, it ran from 2023 to 2024. It was called The End of Fossil Fuel. And again, another pop-up exhibition in Soho. This exhibition explored how climate change and inequality go hand in hand. So the learning section was very focused on the unequal impacts of climate change, how they're visible at the local, national, and international levels, how climate change is rooted in colonialism, how it connects to the Industrial Revolution, to racism, like these very deep historical roots of. One question that I got to think about while working on this show was, how did we get here, and how do we get there? Like, how do we get there to a climate-just future? And the art in this exhibition, the art part of this trio in this exhibition, we commissioned a mural by author and illustrator R. Gregory Christie that followed that same set of questions. How did we get here, and how do we get there to a climate-just future? It was really great working with him also because he was not, like, a climate person. So we asked him, like, hey, can we commission you to create a mural about climate justice? And he said, yeah, that sounds great. I would love to. Also, what is that? And it was a really great moment because, like, we had an understanding of what it was. But then when you ask someone, what do you see when you imagine a climate-just future? What do you see when you imagine a future that is safe from climate change, to use more, like, public-friendly language? And we realized that people fundamentally weren't asking that question. They were you're kind of just falling into, again, the doom and gloom, the apocalypse. You think of the future and you feel like maybe it's not so bright. So when we were specifically asking people, like, what do you imagine if you imagine things going right? And they were like, I've genuinely never thought of that. So that was another really important moment for us. And so finally, the action section of this exhibition. Another action center, similar postcards, writing to representatives, getting involved at the local level. But now I'll get into the sticker wall. So the sticker wall, again, also always a part of our action center. But basically when people commit to actions, they'll take a sticker, they'll write their name, they'll write the date, they'll write their goals, they'll write their Instagram and TikTok handles. But it was a really great way, we've realized over the years, that people can really leave, like quite literally leave their own mark on the exhibition and like see everyone else who has stood where they stood and felt what they felt and cared about what they care about. And the sticker wall for us has been a really effective way to have this visual representation of the collective and the power that everyone has when they come together. This quite literal transformation that you can see. Um, and so we still use this tool, like I said, with every exhibition. It's still like one of the highlights of our shows, and people really respond to it well. I've had tours. One of my favorite things is we'll have high school tours, and of course, the young, energetic teenagers will like take 10 steps back and then take a running launch to the sticker wall to like slap it as high as they possibly can. But there's something very satisfying about like any kind of, as a museum person, any kind of engagement is satisfying to me. So I'm really happy that people are excited about that. So with this exhibition too, we also were very lucky to be able to work with researchers from George Mason University to do audience polling. And their results were published in PLOS Climate last year, I believe. And they basically found that this exhibition, we polled visitors before and after seeing the show, and then I think a few days afterwards. But they found that this exhibition increased visitors' determination and confidence to talk about climate, hope in their ability to achieve climate progress together, understanding that more people are concerned about climate change than they previously thought. And like I said, all of these point to an enhanced sense of agency. People felt empowered leaving this exhibition rather than, shut down because we're talking about climate change. And so the ultimate goal of the Climate Museum, I feel like this came up in the last panel too. We're fighting for this cultural shift that needs to happen, both from the perspective of like how museums teach climate change and how the public is taught climate change, like how they understand and perceive climate change, and the arts and like I said before, we use the arts, culture, and the arts and humanities have always played a role in like both capturing and shifting public opinion. If you think about Rachel Carson's Silent Spring or the Earthrise photo, the first photo of the Earth from the moon. And so this isn't, in some ways this isn't new, and yet we feel like more people should be doing it, because we found so much success connecting to people, building community, making people feel less alone. And, one of the ways that we are able to do this is because we take advantage of the strengths that museums inherently have. So they're popular, a lot of people go to them, they're highly trusted by the public. I was on a panel with a researcher from Yale, and she said museums are trusted second only to friends and family, which amazed me. And museums also bring people together. So you can see in this photo, we have a lot of events. We'll do different youth programs, workshops. We host contingents for marches. And so with all of these things coming together really have the potential to have this transformative impact, to create change, to make people feel connected and empowered, like I've said. And then I'll close this section with a photo from our last exhibition. One quote that seems to resonate with people a lot is, "The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible." And so now, like I said, we're in the process of designing our permanent location, which is extremely exciting. Hopefully it'll open in 2030, and you're all invited to the opening. It'll be on the west side of Manhattan. But yeah, it's been a really exciting process to kind of see New York City and New York State leadership invest in a climate museum, and like that as a statement for where we want to go and what needs to be done. It feels great to work on, but it also feels great to recognize that that's where we are right now, in spite of all of these other challenges that we're undeniably facing. So in closing, I just wanted to show a few response cards. We'll have response cards in every exhibition, and then we'll have a little guest book that people can sign. And every exhibition, it really shows the gratitude that people feel that we've done something like this that they've never had a chance to see before. And it's just really moving. There's one story that I couldn't capture in a photo, but there was one high school student who came across a different public art project that we were doing. and she was there for a college visit. So we were by NYU. She just happened to be there, didn't know we existed, and she saw what we were doing, and she fully burst into tears. And we're like, "Oh my God, are you okay? What's going on?" I know climate change. There's a lot of emotions, but of course we started a conversation with her, and she was like, "You don't understand. I'm here. I'm on a college visit. I'm in the process of deciding whether I wanted to study art because I'm really passionate about art, or climate change because I'm really terrified of climate change." And I had, I walk through this park. I come across your project, and I had no idea that other people cared about this the way that I care about this. And she had never seen anything like that before. She never encountered this intersection of climate and art. And again, she suddenly felt like she wasn't alone, that she had this potential to do something that she never realized that she could do. Um, and so that is the power of the art learning and action formula that we've begun to implement in our programs. And I'm so excited to talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anais. That was awesome. We're going to bring up Casey Mink from the Natural History Museum of Utah next, once I get slides up, but you can all give her a round of applause as she makes her way.
Hi, I first wanted to just say thank you so much for having me up here on this panel. It is such an honor to be here. My name is Casey Clifford, and I am an exhibit developer at the Natural History Museum of Utah. We are the state museum located in Salt Lake City, Utah, and this is our new building that new as of 2011, so it's about a little over a decade old. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this exhibit we created called Climate of Hope. And we really wanted to create a different kind of climate change museum or exhibit that really was rooted in Utah. And our goal was to create an exhibit centered around how we can build a thriving future in a world with changing climate. And we were really eager to create this new exhibit because this was our old climate change exhibit, and it really conflated climate and weather. And as you can see, there's a lot of data that is really difficult to interpret. And it was so out of date that visitors actually left us little post-it notes on the exhibit to update the exhibit and tell us how out of date it was. And so the first thing we did was we talked with our visitors and asked them what topics they were most interested in learning about in a new exhibit on climate change. And you can see the top 5 here are what visitors were really interested in learning about. So visions of what life would look like in a sustainable, low-carbon future, the impacts of climate change on human health, how Earth's climate system works, what people like me can do to reduce climate change, and how actions that reduce climate change can improve air quality. And visitors were less interested in these bottom 3, so the causes of climate change, what is being done globally to reduce climate change, and the impacts of climate change globally. But what's interesting is that a lot of climate change exhibits in the past, and also how climate change is maybe discussed in the media, really focuses on these bottom 3 topics. So we knew that we really wanted to create a different kind of exhibit that was really local and focused on local issues. And so climate communication tells us that how we frame climate change really matters. And so when I talk about frames, I talk about the ideas and the words and the images and really just how we message climate change. And so there's a lot of unproductive frames that have been used to communicate climate change in the past that are listed here on the left. So fear, the images of wildfires and mass devastation, and communicating climate change through fear really just leads to more fear, unsurprisingly. So we really wanted to instead focus on hope. And rational hope is a term coined by Katharine Hayhoe, a climate scientist, where you understand the scope of the problem, but also understand that there are solutions that can be implemented to help. Another frame often used is argument or debate, and this is really rooted in politics often. And if you say climate change is real or climate change is not real, it really just leans into this debate and opens the door for more debate. And so we instead want to focus on community and that we're really all in this together. Another frame is guilt and sacrifice. So you need to fly less and drive less and eat less meat and have a lot less fun. And really humans are really predisposed to not want to sacrifice. So we really want to gain. And so instead focusing on this better future frame or a gain frame that the future can actually look better, then and then distance as well. So climate change is something that's happening in the Arctic and polar bears are dying, and that's true and that's awful, but really want to focus on the here and now and local stories. And also more data, like our older climate change exhibit that had a lot of data. We really want to focus instead of stories of Utah people and places. And so these are all on the right. These are what I'm going to call side door frames as opposed to a front door frame, which is like knocking on the front door saying climate change is real and we're all going to die. And so we did many rounds of prototyping, and we spent a lot of time prototyping these ideas to make sure they were resonating with visitors. We actually ended up building, this was in 2020, as you can see, building our entire exhibit out of cardboard and testing all these ideas with our visitors. And then this is the exhibit that we have up now. It was opened in 2023, so a couple of years ago. And this is the beginning of the exhibit where you walk in and you're immersed in this aspen grove environment. Aspens are Utah state trees, so they really resonate with our visitors. And there are these touch screens that visitors can select an emotion on, and then the emotion flies off into the grove and affects the projection of an aspen grove. And what's really cool is that visitors can actually look at this graph and see what other people are selecting around climate change, what emotion that they're selecting. And people really like that they can see that other people are also concerned and sad and optimistic about climate change in Utah. And then this is the next section of the exhibit called Hotter, Drier, Smokier, where we really talk about how climate change is affecting Utah now. And it uses really local examples of drought and warmer winters and hotter summers. And we have videos called Results Will Vary that highlight local communities in Utah, representatives from 6 of these local communities talking about how climate change is affecting them and their local communities. And then Our Climate, Our Health is a scrolling story interactive that talks about how climate change is affecting the health of local Utahns. And then we jump quickly into building momentum. So all of the solutions that are in place in Utah and are being done, it really features people from all over, these local projects that are happening. We have a spotlight called Innovators Needed, where we really focus on one particular project. And right now we're highlighting Utah Forge, which is a local advanced geothermal company. And then the last bit of the exhibit is called Connecting Around Climate. And we really want to leave visitors with this idea that talking about climate change is so important, and we really need to, and talking is a way to take action on climate change. So we have this interactive on the top right here, which is meant to be a humorous approach to having a conversation about climate change, which can often be really difficult. And we use GIFs to kind of make it a little bit more humorous and fun. And then there's an interactive that's a projection where you get to actually see people having conversations about climate change. So we conducted some research on how visitors are learning in a climate of hope. We received an NSF grant, and our curator of learning sciences, Lynn Zumo, actually conducted research. So she analyzed when visitors are uptaking these frames, which we called side doors, and when visitors are rejecting these frames or having closed door moments. And so the data collection consisted of 30 groups, around 76 people, a pre-survey to measure demographics and SASE, which some of you might be familiar in. I'll talk about a little more later. And then point of view, video, and audio, and visitors had about 30 minutes in the exhibit. And so our preliminary research results, the here and now framing, that local, concrete, specific, relatable framing, we found that visitors have a lot of these side door moments and really uptake the frames when the here and now frame is used. And so some of the elements that were really helpful, here is a picture of ice skating on Liberty Park Pond, which is a really local, popular pond in Salt Lake City that barely freezes over now. And so it's really surprising that to visitors that people were actually able to ice skate on this pond up until the 1960s. Another example is this graph, which talks about the number of days over 100 degrees in Tooele, which is a town in Utah. And this graph is really easy to understand, and people had a lot of moments of uptaking the frames here as well. And when Better Future was paired with the here and now framing, so the better future, remember, is that the future can actually look better if we take action on climate change. This map is a map of renewable energy projects that are happening all around Utah, and this was really helpful in visitors uptaking this frame as well. However, when this Better Future frame was paired with new or abstract concepts, visitors tended to reject this frame and often fell back on more familiar but less productive frames like powerlessness and blaming. So, for example, this is an interactive called the Switches On, which talks about switching to a new energy system. And it was very abstract for people. One of our visitors said, I don't have the money to buy an electric vehicle and I don't pay for my own utilities. So even though electric vehicles are only mentioned once in this 3-minute long video interactive, people really fell back on their own perceptions. So, as I said, this is the SASE survey, so the 6 America's super short survey done by the Yale Program of Climate Communication. And this is data that's actually input from our visitors. So it's pretty similar to the national average. Our visitors lean a little bit more alarmed and concerned and a little bit less doubtful and dismissive. But we found that visitors from across the 6 America spectrum experienced engagement and had productive conversations in a climate of hope, which is awesome. We also found that climate of hope does not polarize visitors based on their climate change views. And we hope that with further research, we hope to identify the mechanisms that support this broad engagement. Thank you so much. Our head exhibit developer, Lisa Thompson, is listed here, as well as Lynn Zumo, our curator of learning sciences, who conducted the study. And we created a companion website to go along with this exhibit. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can explore the exhibit online. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey. All right, next we're going to bring up Jen Kretser from the Wild Center. Please give Jen a round of applause while I get her slides up.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here and be a part of this amazing panel. I was writing down so many notes that I want to ask the panelists before me, and so I just get so excited about getting all together. So again, I'm Jen Kretser, I'm Director of Climate Initiatives from the Wild Center. We are a mashup of a science center, a nature center, an aquarium, and a natural history museum, all rolled into one in the northern Adirondack Park in New York State. So on my drive to the airport yesterday, all these mountains were covered in snow, and all the leaves are actually all down now, so it feels really warm and like I'm traveling back in time coming here to Pennsylvania. We have a 115-acre campus on the banks of the Racket River, the second longest river in New York State that flows north into the St. Lawrence. This is our main museum. We opened in 2006, so next year is our 20th anniversary. And we opened as a certified Silver LEED facility. So we knew right from the beginning when the museum opened that we wanted to be both a demonstration and an education place for people to learn about green buildings, to learn about climate change, and to connect to nature. We are a very local, place-based museum that really strives to connect people in nature and help them to take action in the world to help protect it. So I'm going to talk a bit about our climate programming at a high level, and I really welcome any conversations later on today if you see programming that you're interested in. This framework is from UNFCCC Action for Climate Empowerment, and I use this because I want to take a real holistic look at how we engage people, our audiences, in climate change. So of course we do education through K-12 or actually K-16, but we also think about training, how we're developing a new workforce through our internships and fellowships, or how we might work with builders and contractors to train them on new experiences or new skill sets. We really work across the sort of public space to build public awareness, access to information, and public participation. And we look to coordinate how we can coordinate networks or be a part of networks to accelerate just climate action. So taking this like kind of big picture view helps us to provide lots of different entry points for people to engage with the Wild Center and to learn with us and to co-create learning opportunities. As part of our climate program, and these values were developed over kind of years of work, primarily starting with youth, but they really extend now across all of the different programs that we work on. So that place-based, which we heard a lot already from the first two panelists, really connecting to place, thinking about being action-oriented and solutions-focused. I love the way, Casey, you were describing some of the frames, and like I really resonate with that. We work a lot with young people, and we try to elevate young people in all the work that we do. I know I'm very excited for the youth panel that's later today to hear from our young people. That idea of being hopeful and centering equity is really critical. We also, of course, work across many partners, and we could not do it without working with a whole constellation of partners. So the first program I'm going to mention is our Youth Climate Summits. We've been doing summits since 2009. Our summit is actually next week, so I'm happy to be here. I'm slightly distracted thinking about my team back home. But these are gathering opportunities for high school students. They can range from a few hours to our longest summit that we know about is 7 days. At the Wild Center, we have a 2-day summit that brings together about 30 teams from 30 different high schools across the northern part of New York State to learn about climate science and action and how to create solutions for their schools and communities. And they do that by creating projects that they take back. So there's lots of different, it's a conference just kind of like this. You bring lots of people together. Young people hear from plenary speakers. They go to lots of different hands-on workshops. They share out about projects, and then they create these action plans that take them, that they bring back to implement inside their schools or communities. They're very project-based, and the students are driving those ideas themselves, and we provide a lot of support to the educators and teachers that come with them to help implement these projects. These projects are really wide-ranging. So if you can imagine students being like, what's your passion? What do you want to do? It could be a pollinator garden. It could be this project here that was done by one of our partner sites in North Carolina was focusing on doing work around a river basin in North Carolina. We've seen things like carbon neutral proms, which is definitely something I never came up with, but those kids, they were really excited about that. Or they might think of, in a bigger way, particularly schools that have been a part of the program for a while, about working with local governments. And that's something that we were really excited about, and it was an emergent idea that came out of one of our grant projects with NOAA. And in this way, we had young people that were connecting with the Climate Smart Communities program, which is a New York State program to help communities develop climate action plans to make them more resilient. So what we found is that when we started inviting speakers from that project into our summits across New York State, the students got really excited and started making those opportunities to connect and dialogue with local government as part of their project. So this is one of the resources we developed. Everything is free on our website. We've tried to find lots of opportunities for our young people to intersect with local governments. and have opportunities for that dialogue. That intergenerational dialogue is super critical, so that adults can hear what young people are worried about and ideas that young people have towards working on solutions. So this is a panel of youth at a local government agency in the Adirondacks, but we've also gone big and taken groups of young people to some of the COPs. We've developed a do-it-yourself Youth Climate Summit guide, which we realized, early on. I was like, oh, we're going to do these climate summits for maybe a couple of years. This was in 2009, and it's fast forward to 2005, and we've done a lot more than a couple. We've actually helped to inspire, it's not just hit 251, there was a summit in Montana yesterday, in 10 countries and 27 states, utilizing our toolkit and support through our network. We have a network, so if anybody wants to start a youth climate summit, please come talk to me. I'll help you. And they've been really successful. It can be at a cultural institution, at a school. They range in size from 25 students to over 1,000. So there's lots of different ways, and it's not a one size that fits all, but it's definitely an opportunity to connect with those values. Okay, I'm going to switch to some of our public programs. So the Climate Solutions exhibit, we opened this in 2022. And I wanted to thank you, Casey, for mentioning SASE. We also utilize SASE as part of this to really understand where our visitors were at. So what we did is that we decided first hey, let's ask our staff. We were right in the middle of COVID when we had this idea of a climate solutions exhibit. And we really were like, okay, well, what does our staff think that the visitors think? So we administered the survey to our staff, and we found out, if you can look at the orange here, these are what the SASE results were when we put it out to the public, and here is our staff results. So our staff thought our visitors would be much more conservative than they actually were, and so when we got these results that are the orange bars back, that were telling us that, no, your public thinks this, our visitors think this. We were like, oh, that can't be right, the data's wrong, we can't believe that is ridiculous. And so there was like an 82%, even though it was like around 82%. So then we did it again, and as it turned out that we were totally wrong. So, really what we saw was in these two surveys, because we were so convinced that we were right and the data was wrong, which of course was not right, and it was very humbling, that 84% of our visitors were actually in the alarmed and concerned. Again, this was a big surprise to us. We live in a very rural, conservative region and district in New York State, and we were extremely surprised by this data. But what that did was it shifted our entire tone and how we thought about our visitors and how we wanted to do the exhibition. So the exhibition itself is about 3,000 square feet. It also includes a tinkering studio and a maker space where we do a lot of stuff to do skill development. But what was really amazing about this was the full campus integration. So prior to this, it was like, oh, Jen runs this youth program with students everywhere, but no visitor would ever see it. So once we centered our climate work in the middle of the museum, all of a sudden there was this huge uptake across the museum. So it really created a lot of buy-in around our climate work. It really helped us to set a strategic goal for the institution to create a pathway to net zero. We utilized our Science on a Sphere program to build more climate literacy. We did more green tours. We have a large-scale compost system. We created a new movie. We looked at staff training across the board. And this is all over a course of years. It didn't all happen at once, but it really was a game changer for our entire institution. So it kind of took our climate program, our youth climate program, which was very outward facing, and created this sort of whole scale approach to climate change. So the big idea around the exhibition was people across sectors, generations, and backgrounds are building a web of climate solutions and inviting all of us to find our place in the climate movement. And we did this through focusing on these 12 portraits. So these are huge portraits where the people featured in the portraits are looking right at the audience or at the visitor. And these large format portraits all share stories through either video or voice around what solutions all of these different people are working on. And there's a multitude of of people, and a multitude of solutions that were being offered, from a climate scientist to a young farmer to teachers and storytellers to architects and farmers to folks that like Neil Patterson, who is an elder with the Tuscarora Nation and really thinks about gratitude and reciprocity as a climate solution. So there was like such this really big perspective, but all voices that were talking about local solutions. So this was a great framing for us, and is similar to some of the things that were already mentioned. So that, just to go back to this for a second, I did want to mention that with this, we, in the longitudinal evaluation, we really saw that storytelling was critical. So having first-person stories where each of these portraits was able to, each of the people featured were able to tell their own stories was really important. It provided a lot of entry points. People saw themselves in the portraits and in those solutions, highlighting that local context. Oh my gosh, all this stuff's happening in the North Country, the Adirondacks, like who knew? So that was super important to see that, and we're offering a range of different solutions, and that invitation piece was key. Like people want to, as we heard previously, they are alarmed and they want to act, they just don't know how. So they left the exhibition feeling like, oh, I can be a part of this too. I can be a part of the solution. And that was really important finding for us in the evaluation that was done by Kira Collective. So the other ways that we've utilized the museum, and I'm so glad that we've already heard about the trust that exists for cultural institutions, is that we've really thought about our institution as this convening space. So we have a very seasonal audience, and during the winter time we close down like 3 days a week, and so we use those 3 days as times that we can bring in folks to have like unique conversations. So for example, every other year we host an Adirondack building conference that brings in contractors, builders, planners, architects, and designers to talk about the latest in green building in cold weather climates. We haul out our electric, we also bring out things like our, electric chainsaws and mowers, and we like bring those, we like take, it's like kind of a funny, but we like sort of fling back the curtains and let people see how our building works and runs, and that makes a big difference. People want to see solutions, and we try to make those visible. Another conversation that we've convened is around winter culture and economy. So that's one of the things that for us, it's part of our cultural identity. So it not only is a giant driver of our economy, the skiing, the snowshoeing, the ice fishing, the ice skating, the hockey, the snowmobiling, all of it, but it's also a huge part of our identity. And that identity is at risk. There have been years when, the snow leaves in middle of February. Like normally we're like April-ish is when the snow disappears. So, or the lakes aren't safe enough to have ice fishing anymore, and those are big drivers for business. So these were another way in which we brought together conversations that were important to our communities. Most recently, I've been a part of a project called the Adirondack Climate Outreach and Resilience Network, and this is a project called Acorn, where we got a little bit of funding from the state of New York to do listening sessions across the state. We did 12 community listening sessions with 65 different communities represented, over 300 focus groups, meetings, plus an online survey to create a North Country rural resilience roadmap. So the whole idea of this is that we wanted to apply for some of the large funding that had been coming out of the BIL and IRA, but we realized as a rural region, we just could not, we did not have a baseline, and we did not have a full understanding of what resources were out there and what the biggest challenges were. We just got our final report reviewed, and we will have that roadmap online shortly. And I want to do a nod to my colleagues at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, because we used some of their work with the CRISP project to use that as a way to create these interactive sessions across all of our all of our counties that we worked with in this project. So it was, you know, kind of funny. People would be like, what's the Wild Center doing this? But it was that trust that they had in us to be in part of these communities. And we worked closely with a local college that also has a lot of trust, and one other organization that really helped us to kind of, through all of our spheres of influence, have the opportunity to build this roadmap. Finally, this past spring, we had an Adirondack Climate Conference, which is something that, again, like pulled together all of the folks across that ACORN work into one place. We were able to talk about the big challenges in our region, such as flooding, and help people and highlight people that we met across that ACORN journey in those 14 counties to bring together folks to talk about solutions. So those are some of the programs that the Wild Center is doing around climate education and interpretation and community engagement, and I welcome questions and follow-up anytime. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. All right, our next panelist, which is Mark Wourms from Bernheim Forest and Arboretum. Let me just get his slides up and give him a round of applause while I do so.
Anyway, I'm Mark Wourms, President and CEO at Bernheim Forest and Arboretum. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be with this panel. Bernheim is a place outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And I want to give you a little bit of context about who we are and what we are and where we came from, because that influences our actions today. So Bernheim's mission is connecting people with nature. Our vision is a world where nature is cherished, protected, and restored. We hope to be part of nature's CPR. We were established in 1929 by Isaac Wolf Bernheim, who, of course, is a bourbon distiller. And that's the way you make money in Kentucky, I think. But anyway, we have major focus areas, and they range from horticulture and sustainable landscapes to ecological restoration and research, arts in nature, curiosity and learning, which many people call education, recreation activities, public events and programs fall into that, regenerative design, and conservation, biodiversity, and restoration of natural systems. I'm going to touch on some of those as we go. But I want you to know we're celebrating our 96th year. And so we're really already looking at our centennial and reassessing how can we be bolder with our climate mission? How can we be bolder without our education? How can we be bolder throughout the state and the region? So we put together a climate crisis action plan. And this was put together by Bernheim staff and board, and by a panel of about 20 outside experts of various fields. And we did this so that we would have a roadmap. The roadmap concept keeps coming up today, and it's very, very important. You have to have something that you can point to, that you can refer to, that you can say, hey, here are our goals, here is what we want to achieve. And so like everybody, we started with a carbon analysis, and of course scope 1 and 2 are pretty low for us. But the visitors and the travel is the big one. And although you're not necessarily responsible for that, we felt we had to. You know, we have 300,000 visitors a year. Somebody's got to be responsible for that carbon. So in our plan, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these in detail, but I will read them because it's a 10-goal plan. Protect the land is number 1. Plug into renewables, create buildings that give back, slash waste and boost recycling, model regenerative horticulture, cut the engines, serve sustainability, tell a compelling climate story, deploy art to change hearts and minds, and boost inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. I'm going to go into a couple of these in a little more detail because it also explains how we interpret science and nature for our general public. First of all, our goal 1, protect the land. Bernheim has been doing this since our founding in 1929. Our founder, Isaac Wolf Bernheim, bought 12,000 acres of deforested, degraded farmland and mined land. And from then, in the 96 years, it has regenerated beautifully, both with and without human help. This is a picture of part of Bernheim right here. And we've done that over time. In fact, today we are now 16,500 acres of land purchased in various parcels. We also now protect 1,600 acres with conservation easements. And so we're protecting over 18,000 acres of land. If you think about it, land protection, forest restoration, natural systems is the #1 way to mitigate climate change. And so we're trying to do it all we can in central Kentucky because it's being chewed up right now. In much of it, in our area, is due to big box distribution centers that are popping up like mushrooms. And so we really want to head that off as quickly as we can. And of course, that's clean air, clean water, rich biodiversity, beauty, tranquility, and everything else that comes with beautiful, healthy lands. We do a lot of habitat management. Prescribed burns, we're restoring entire streams that have been moved by farmers, and we're putting them back into meanders in the valley. So there's a lot of habitat management that occurs. We're also working with our friends, the beavers. In fact, we have a beaver brigade. And what they do is they help protect some of our arboretum trees from beavers, but we also go out and build beaver dam analogs where we think, hey, this would be a good place for a beaver dam. We go and put sticks down into that creek so it encourages beavers. And you know what? It works quite often. So we like our beavers. This, by the way, is a shot by one of our artists in residence that used a laser-guided camera trap to get this photo. We're plugging into renewables. You've seen some big-scale projects. I want to remind you, as Richard did earlier, it's not always scale that matters. It's about what you can do. And at Bernheim, we've done a lot of smaller-scale solar projects right in the people's faces. And you know, we've got them repeated throughout the visitor experience. And so we talk about them, we show them, we let them know that solar can be effective even on a smaller scale. And by the way, in Kentucky, our energy companies have said, oh, we're too cloudy for solar, and we're not enough wind for wind. We don't have enough wind for turbines. So, you know, we're trying to prove that wrong. Making buildings that give back. We're doing that both on our site. On the right, you'll see our visitor center, first platinum LEED certified building in a 5-state area back in 2006. Very proud of that building. It also has a living roof on it. So now we've exported that expertise into downtown Louisville, where we manage 3 different living roofs under contract. And the fun part is, the one I'm showing is an old picture where we literally tested glade plants, meadow plants, and horticultural variety of plants versus the sedum roof that was originally laid. Now the entire roof and an upper story are all glade plants because they perform so well on a roof. We tell that story both at that roof in seminars and at Bernheim. We're cutting the engines in big and small ways. We're electrifying our fleet. But 2 of the things that have made a big difference for our visitors is, one, we bought an electric tram. This wheelchair accessible tram gets people around. It's really used to rescue people more than it is any kind of tour. We're a big place of, 600-acre arboretum and 16,000 extra that public can visit. So we actually go out and say, oh, it's a little warm today, isn't it? Would you like a ride? And, that's what it's used for. The second one is the Grit wheelchair. Again, coming back to that accessibility. This is available for people with wheelchairs. It's a little better on all terrain. And so we're trying to say, hey, we want everybody involved with nature. We just opened a wheelchair accessible treehouse 2 weeks ago. And it's been a raving success. So these are the ways that we're trying to say, hey, nature's for everybody. Target 6 or Goal 6 is cutting the engines. And so, as I said, we're electrifying our fleet, but we're also have EV chargers out for the public. We have 8. They are free of charge, and each one of the 2 sets has some kind of graphic about the benefits of EVs, the benefits of electric motors. And of course, we tell our story to lots of people, including 10,000 plus students a year. And one of the ways you do that is you get them into one of the cleanest streams in Kentucky, which we control the entire headwaters for. And you know, suddenly these kids coming from the city have immersed themselves in nature. And that means a lot. It changes the way they look at the world. And then we follow it up with lesson plans to the students and teachers about stream ecology and about what they can do to help protect water. Whenever we talk about an environmental issue, we also provide solutions where we can. The one I want to spend a little bit more time with is deploying art to change hearts and minds. Bernheim has been doing this for quite some time. You may recognize this critter. This is one of Thomas Dambo's trolls. There are many of them around the country and the world right now. We call them forest giants in a giant forest. This is Little Nis, and Little Nis is looking down at his reflection in the pond saying, how can I help protect this forest? What can I do to be a better steward of the earth? And that's the lesson that we try to give every visitor who comes to see our forest giants. But we've done some other fun, funky things. Here is Acre by Ann Peabody. This is an artist in residence. She happens to be an internationally renowned artist. And while she was living at Bernheim in one of our cabins during her residency, she found out that prior to the purchase by Isaac Wolf Bernheim, the forests in that area were being cut at 1 acre a day to fuel iron ore furnaces. And so Ann says, well, what does that mean? What is an acre? How big is an acre? What kind of biodiversity can an acre support? How do we show that? And so she came up with this idea. So we gave her an acre of land on the backside of one of our lakes, and she's surrounded by 81 Merlot redbud trees, so that there's a beautiful flush of color in the spring and a beautiful flush of purple during the early summer, and some fall color as well. And then in the middle, we've got these wonderful little paths that are surrounded by pollinator habitat. And the graphics talk about what is an acre. But more importantly, we talk about land use then and land use now. As I mentioned, land is being chewed up by development because there's a UPS World Port just up I-65 from us. And so big box distribution centers are sprouting. Some of those distribution centers are as much as 20 acres in size. And so we ask that question. We don't say, hey, they're evil or they're bad. We kind of say, how should land be used? What if conservation stayed in pace with development? So those are the kinds of things we use art to ask questions about. Here's a study that was done that looked at all the water on Earth. And it's a really neat study. And so if you look at those drops, that's all water, the bigger drop on the planet. And the lesser one is all the fresh water on the planet. Now we think the oceans, we call ourselves the blue planet. But in reality, our oceans are very thin compared to the size of the Earth. And so it's almost like dew on an apple. So how do you convey that to students? Well, we decided you'd do something like this. This is H2O, and it's by Dave Mayo Architects, happens to be out of Louisville. We're proud of that. This is at a scale of 1 inch equals 200 miles. And so the thickness of that stainless steel ring is about the thickness of the entire atmosphere. So already you're kind of saying, wow, we're really breathing an envelope of air. Then, if you look down at the base, there's a pile of rocks. In those rocks, there's a small pond. that represents all the water on Earth. Oceans, fresh water, glaciers, you name it. Suddenly, students are looking at that saying, no, that can't be right. But the science is there to prove it. And so the idea is you have to touch the heart to get the mind. And that's what we use art in LA&D about. Give you another weird example, one that I really like, and we get a lot of comments about. This one is called At Least We Looked Good. And it examines the ecological impacts of fast fashion. And fast fashion is a phenomena. It's a horrible phenomena. Fashion production produces 20% of global wastewater. 100 billion garments a year are produced. 95% of them end up in landfills 1 year later. 20% of pesticides go to textile production. Up to 35% of microplastics in the oceans are traced back to fake fibers. So, these are all things that we don't think about. Now, so we point those out on the clotheslines. There's big banners that, put out those facts. But if you're going to say this is terrible, you got to say, what are we going to do about it? What can you do about it? And how do we hold the industries responsible? How do we hold the brands responsible? So we ask on those same different banners on the same clotheslines, ask yourself a few simple questions. Do I need this? Or am I chasing a fashion? Is this a natural fiber? Can I sew something or ignore a stain? Can I trade up or down with family and friends so I don't have to buy something new? Those are just simple little questions to get you thinking about what's in your closet and what do you need when you walk in a store. Now, we do sometimes hit you a little harder than that. And so here I'm standing in front of what represents about 2,000 gallons of water. And that is the amount of water it takes to produce one pair of blue jeans. And so, again, it gets you thinking about, how long do I need another pair of blue jeans? Or can I, do this? Do 2,000 gallons times billions, and it's a huge amount of water. So we use art to get you thinking. We use science to provide the basis. And we use fun and funkiness sometimes to get your attention. With that, I want to conclude by saying that we look at sustainability from 3 spheres, and they all have to come together: environmental, economic, and social. And in all of those kinds of things, when those come together, then we're truly sustainable, because the economics will work, the society will be bought in, it'll be equitable, and the environment will provide healthier ways forward. So that's what we try to do with art in nature at Bernheim. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all of our panelists. Give us a round of applause for all of our panelists again. So we are right up against the hour, and I don't want to delay lunch because it's lunchtime and you can't delay lunch. So in lieu of me asking questions, I want to just get 1 or 2 audience questions for our panelists. So if anyone has a question, then I'm just going to repeat it back to the audience instead of having the mic. So I'm going to pick you first. So I just want to repeat the question so it's on the audio. So the question's around funding, and is it mostly coming from philanthropic donations, or where is the funding sourced from? It's a abridged version, but it's close enough. And whoever wants to take it first, the microphone's right in front of you, and it should be on already to take it.
Hi, thank you so much for your question. Can everyone hear me? So at the Natural History Museum of Utah, we are very fortunate. We have a lot of funding from the state, from our philanthropy department, and from private donors as well. We did have a very large NSF grant that we received in order to remediate on our exhibit. However, that was canceled due to the administration, and so yeah, we were able to scrounge up a little bit more from philanthropy to conduct more research on the exhibit, but obviously a very smaller amount. So we were fortunate to have a very large fund of money to pull for creating the exhibit, but it is sad that we don't have as much in order to remediate and, yeah, elaborate on the exhibit.
Hi, thank you for your question. I feel like I have a similar story. Funding is always a challenge for us. I think one thing that we've found that works for us is that we get our funding primarily from the city and the state, New York City and New York State, foundations and individual donors. We do not get federal funding, which again in this context has kind of we didn't lose any money, and it also helps us kind of like keep our like maintain the integrity of our curatorial message and our institutional voice. I will say, like, we have fantastic supporters. The one issue that we sometimes run into is we're so interdisciplinary that sometimes we get pushed. Like, I don't work on development, so this is a secondhand story, but like sometimes we'll get pushed from like, oh, you do this stuff, you're in the arts program, or like, oh no, you do this stuff, you're in the youth program, or like, oh, you do climate stuff, you actually have to go to the science program, and sometimes people don't know where to put us, and sometimes that holds us back. So I hope one day more interdisciplinary sources can be more accessible.
Again, thanks for that question. Similarly, we have a lot of, we apply for grants. We have admission into our museum that supports it. We have individual donors that supports it. So there's like a whole portfolio. We did have some federal funding through Institute of Museum and Library Services, which we lost this past year, which was really unfortunate. That focused on some of our climate education work. And I would say you had asked in the beginning of your question around pay for like the, I'll talk specifically like those portraits that you saw in our climate exhibit. We definitely compensated artists for their time that they went out with the photographers and did that. So that was compensated. With our youth programs, we do pay our young people, and that's something we're really committed to. And so that's been something that's been really important to us as well, as providing that pay equity. But it's a tough year on getting raising dollars, and so it's something that we're constantly looking for new sources of funding and ways, especially now that the all of the federal funding sources are really have been pulled back or are being dismantled. So that's something that we're pivoting on. I will say very happily that we just did get funding for AmeriCorps. We thought we had lost it, and we just got reinstated about 2 weeks ago. So we'll have 10 full-time AmeriCorps members that will not only support our museum, but also our full community, because they work out at the library, the school, and like many, many other local nonprofits across our small rural community. So that was a huge surprise and really welcomed.
Yes, at Bernheim, we received no federal or state funding. We actually just had our first NEA grant that was a reimbursable. We did not spend against it, and of course, 2 months later, we got the letter saying, sorry, it's been closed out. But with that, we do pay artists. We believe in that, both as in our 45 years of doing artists in residence and also in our LA&D exhibit that you just saw. And because of that, I mean, I hate to say it, but paid residencies are pretty darn rare. Because of that, we'll do a call for submissions, and we'll get 260 applications from 35 countries and 34 states. I mean, people are looking for it, and they're fabulous. So, by the way, one of our artists in residence is always an environmental artist in residency. So,
well, thank you, everyone. I want to give us another round of applause for our panelists. It was great.